All right, welcome back. One of the big things Donald Trump ran on, if you remember back to 2015, was we're going to build that wall. And Donald Trump's mantra was, if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. And Donald Trump made monumental gains at cutting off our borders, okay? And Joe Biden immediately jumped right in and started reversing them as soon as he got in office with, a bunch of executive orders. One of them in particular was trying to stop deportations, okay? Now the White House has issued a temporary protected status decree allowing tens of thousands of Venezuelans to remain in the U.S. with legal standing. And my next guest joins you right now, Steve Maggi, says this is just the latest reversal of a Trump policy that returns the U.S. to its status as a mecca for immigrants looking for a new life. Steve, maybe you said something like that. I think that was my other guest quote, but it sure looked like there was a concerted effort in Central and Latin America to get people to the border in advance of the election with hopes that Joe Biden won. And now the joke's on us, kind of.
Well, this is very different because the Venezuelan population is not coming in through the Mexican border. It's not a Central American country. Most of them are flying in. Most of them that are going to be protected actually have visas and came in with visas and then were stuck because Venezuela prohibited them from coming back because of COVID. So it's a little bit different. And it's interesting to note that President Trump was trying to get that Venezuelan American vote. He actually said in speeches that he was going to potentially pass this TPS himself to try to garner votes. And then he actually signed his last day in office, signed in a deferred protection program for them to protect them from potential deportation. So this is just one step further that Biden's taking, which allows these individuals to apply for work authorization, but it doesn't give them any legal status actually. So there are 9 other countries that have the same thing, and that just adds one more country to the list.
Okay, and then the Trump administration actually secretly deported some Venezuelans, from what I understand. There was a whole hullabaloo down in Congress that they wanted protected status. What does this mean? Will other immigrants seeking asylum try to get added to this list? Is just another way in? What does this actually mean?
I don't think that we should read too much into it. You're talking about 10 countries now that have had humanitarian crises like Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, El Salvador, Honduras, that have had documented humanitarian crises for many years. And this is a program that's been open to those countries for a long time. So I think Venezuela was inevitably going to be part of this program. I wouldn't read into it more than that. I don't think that other countries are going to be added because I don't think there are any other countries that meet that test that are really in crisis. And it's not an individual thing, it's by country. So they look at countries that are really struggling and the individuals that are stuck here in the US that really can't go home. And then they say, okay, this country qualifies. So I don't think this is going to be a wave of other countries being added. I think this was 4 years in the making, quite honestly.
Got it. Some people have, they've been talking recently about how, in December there were 1,000 children, unaccompanied children. Now there's upwards of 3,000. Is this really asylum, or is this kind of, these cartel coyotes just trying to charge people to get them in the country?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very difficult to know until they actually get to present their case. So that's the quagmire here. What do you do with these children who are essentially on purpose left by their families to cross the border by themselves, have no protections, have no recourse to go back? What do you do with them? And what this administration is saying by accepting them is that we won't turn your backs on you. We'll give you your day in court to provide enough proof to show that you really qualify for asylum. And if you don't, we'll send you home. The message is kind of mixed though, and I can see where you're coming from. If they're opening the borders for those cases for people to come in and apply for asylum, where does that stop? How do you let people, and then do you release them again and wait for their day in court, which is what President Trump was against, this catch and release program.
And you start thinking like, I don't know, I got kids. I'm sure you have kids. So, you start thinking, well, like what kind of parent, would just shove their kid over the border unaccompanied? And I don't know what the average age of these kids and stuff is, but when you said they'll have their day in court, there's all this other evidence out there that 90% of the people that ask for asylum never show up for their day in court. So it is kind of a way to beat the system, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the system has been abused by hundreds of thousands of people. It's unfortunate. A lot of these claims are not valid, and you don't get your chance to actually prove that they're not valid until 3 years down the line. So what do you do with these cases? That's the dilemma that this country's facing. There are a million people that are already in this backed up immigration system, the court system. And I personally think that the best thing to have done would be to negotiate with Mexico and to help fund centers on the Mexico side where they could process these petitions and take care of these people while they're waiting. And then if they really do pass the test for what's called well-founded fear, then they get their asylum. But if you do it in the United States and you release them, that's problematic. It's not sending the right message.
Yeah, I thought at one point Trump had this kind of deal with Mexico where they were keeping the people on the other side of the border and they were provisioning them and they were letting them come in. That's been changed. The floodgates have opened. It seems like there. But let me ask you this: what do they do with a kid who's, let's call it 12 years old, and he gets processed? Here's your date. Now, what do they do with that kid? They put him in a foster home. They put him in child services. What happens when they get released into America?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, the first recourse is to put them into these detention centers. And we've seen images of some of these centers that don't look very safe, especially with COVID. So those are very limited. And if not, then usually what happens is they're given to the custody of some family member or someone that knows the family of that child. So they're put in it's sort of like a foster care, temporary foster care with individuals who are legal in the US who are willing to take them and keep them until they have their court date.
It seems like a crazy double standard because you had the whole left, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and everyone else saying Trump's keeping them in cages, he's keeping them in jails. And now we have triple the amount of people, it seems. And, they say it's not a crisis, it's a challenge. But to me, it sure feels like a border crisis that we're dealing with. And, the double standard also is they don't want you to go to work if you're not vaccinated. They want you to get contact traced if you've been sick or around it. All these government mandates here in America. And then we hear, hundreds of illegal aliens are being released into the U.S. with COVID. So it's like a double craziness.
I think what was shocking about what was happening on the Trump administration is that there was a purposeful program to separate these minors from their families. So families would come in together and the Trump administration would send the parents home, expel them from the country, and then keep the children as a way of punishing them and saying, this is what the price that you pay. This is different. These are kids that are coming in unaccompanied and then they're being processed. So that was particularly offensive even to a lot of Republicans because those poor kids were getting separated on purpose. And the Biden administration is trying to reunite them and start over. In terms of COVID, obviously there should always be protocols in place to make sure that if they're exposed to anyone, just like anyone in a detention center, or if they're going to court, that they will be tested. And I'm sure that is the case. I don't know more about that specifically, but I would imagine that's one of the protocols that is in place.
Yeah, the mayor of one of the small border towns, the name's escaping me right now, I saw him on Fox the other day saying that, we're basically being overrun now because it's like a place right after where the fence stopped. So they've found this new route and these towns are being populated and the mayor is begging anybody for help. It seems like, but Look, America's the land of great promise. It's the shining city on the hill. I can understand why so many people want to get here. Um, but the more time I spend, I'm out on the campaign trail right now myself, and the more people I talk to who've been through the legal immigration process, you'd be shocked how many of them are more supportive of Trump's policies because those people feel like they had to work so hard and spend time and money and hire a great attorney like you. And those people in particular, they don't like seeing other people take a shortcut, cut the line, and get in because they know how much they had to do to become a naturalized member of this country.
Yeah, I completely understand that point of view.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. But Steve, you're always a great guest. We got to have you back soon.
Anytime.
Steve
Thank you.
Maggi,
Appreciate
one of the
it.
great immigration attorneys. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, you guys stick right with us. We'll come back and wrap up hour 2 of a terrific Tuesday. Right.